Chapter 3. Iqbal, a bridge between East and West. When human nature is overborne by worldliness and cynicism, it is the poets and thinkers who come to its rescue by revealing truths and realities which are either forgotten or concealed from common eyes. So far as the poet is concerned in doing this, he is only performing his prophetic role which represents his highest office. According to Iqbal, the aim of poetry as well as all art is to make human life rich and glorious by awakening man to the divine side of things. Through his art, Iqbal tries to appeal to the higher side of human nature and to strengthen it when it is overborne by material interests. And it can be said that the world has rarely seen so powerful and capacious a soul devote itself to art and a lofty end with such clear vision and singleness of purpose. When Iqbal started writing poetry, most of the East was under the domination of the West. As the East was beginning to show signs of awakening, the West was busy in extending her conquests, as well as lulling the East to sleep. Although the West was economically and politically powerful and prosperous, there were beginning to appear on the horizon some dark clouds which foretold a dismal future for mankind. The prospect before man was very gloomy indeed, which set Iqbal thinking. With increasing prescience, he set about diagnosing the ills from which man was suffering, and once he had diagnosed the ills, he got busy in finding a remedy for them. According to him, this remedy consisted in creating a new world order based on the synthesis of Eastern and Western cultures. To achieve this, he had to provide a bridge between East and West. And he provided this when laying down the outlines of the new world order, in which both the individual and the society would develop harmoniously. Starting with the individual, Iqbal could see that human society could exist peacefully and harmoniously only when the individuals composing it developed in a balanced way. So, he devoted his energies to the study of factors and forces which fortify human personality, and he described these in a poem of great beauty and charm, Asrar-i-Khudi. This poem has been translated in English, and the translation has been published as Secrets of the Self. The factors which fortify human personality are, first, love. Second, faqr, which can be best described by the expression supreme indifference to the rewards the world has to offer. 3, courage. 4, tolerance. 5th, kasbi halal, which can be best translated as living on lawful earnings. 6, taking part in original and creative activities. All these factors have an important part to play in the development of human personality, but out of all these, love is by far the most important. For Iqbal, love is the regenerating spirit of the universe, the spirit that should cut the Gordian knot of all man's perplexities and provide an antidote to all human vices. Poets in all languages, mystics in all countries, metaphysicians in all religions, and thinkers in all languages have laid stress on the importance of love in the development of human character, and they have described in beautiful language what they understand by love, but rarely has anyone laid so much stress on love as a factor in the development of human personality, or used the term in such a wide sense, as Iqbal. The following passage from Thomas à Kempis will give Western readers an idea of what Iqbal understands by love. Love feels no burden, thinks nothing of trouble, attempts what is above its strength, pleads no excuse of impossibility, for it thinks all things lawful for itself and all things possible. It is therefore able to undertake all things and to complete many things and bring them to a conclusion, where he who does not love faints and lies down. While referring to the importance of creativeness in the development of personality, Iqbal refers to the Quran, which expressly mentions creators besides God. In fact, according to Iqbal, the difference between a believer and a non-believer is not one of theological belief or disbelief, but is constituted in the fact that while a believer is a creator, a non-believer is not. The creative element in man raises him to the divine plane. Frustration of the creative impulse distorts human character. Iqbal maintains that the growth of a full and free personality is impossible unless it draws its spiritual sustenance from the group to which it belongs. On the other hand, the group in its own interests owes a duty to the individual and so should interfere with his development as little as possible, and then only when common good demands it. For such an ideal society, Iqbal has laid down 7 essential requirements. It must be based on spiritual considerations demanding loyalty to God and not to thrones. It must center around inspired leadership or prophethood. It must have a code for its guidance. It needs a center. It must have a goal, towards the attainment of which all its efforts must be directed. It must try to gain superiority over the forces of nature. It must safeguard maternity. It will be seen that in his philosophy of ego, Iqbal does not only prescribe a complete scheme for the development of the individual, but has also described the essentials of the society, which in its turn is most conducive to the development of the ego. In these prescriptions, Iqbal only provides a bridge between East and West, supplementing Eastern listlessness by Western dynamism, enriching Western materialism by Eastern spiritualism. His political philosophy was based on 2 essential elements of Islam: the unity of God and the finality of prophethood. Iqbal, following Islam, insists upon inner experience as a source of human knowledge and also on 2 sources, nature and history. Iqbal favored various rationalist, traditionalist and mystic movements in Islam, encouraging a dynamic conception of the universe. He once raised the concept of the unity of human origin and of a sense of reality of time regarding life as a continuous movement in time. Here one sees a bridge between Muslim mystics and modern Western philosophers like Bergson. In fact, this bridge can be seen throughout Iqbal's philosophy of ego and other trends of his thought. Having dealt with the development of the individual and the society, Iqbal wanted to write a poem analyzing the causes which lead to the growth and decay of human culture. It is unfortunate that he could not find time to write this poem. But in all his subsequent compositions and works, poetry and prose, he describes the forces and factors which lead to stability and survival of a healthy culture. Iqbal saw the salvation of the human race only in the evolution of a healthy culture based on respect for human personality. And this culture can be developed only in the synthesis of Eastern and Western values of life. He was eminently qualified to act as a bridge between the 2 cultures because he knew well the defects and virtues of those ways of life. He knew Goethe, Byron and Browning, as well as Rumi, Ghalib and Bedil, the great Oriental poets. To attain a synthesis, he wanted on the one hand to replace the Oriental spirit of listlessness and self-negation by the dynamic activism characteristic of the West, and on the other hand, to revitalize emotionally arid intellectualism of the West by vital faith in spiritual values that underlies the Eastern culture. Emphasizing the urgency and need for a synthesis between the Eastern and Western cultures, he wrote, "In the West, the essence of life is the intellect. In the East, the basis of life is love. Through love, intellect grows acquainted with reality, and intellect gives stability to the world of love. Arise and lay the foundations of a new world by wedding intellect to love." In the culture established as a result of this synthesis, there will be no room for distinctions of color and race, and no lust for land and dominance. The basis of this synthesized culture will be provided by respect for human personality and the enthusiastic devotion to the study of sciences. Iqbal's own genius presented one of the best examples of this synthesis. As just mentioned, Iqbal wanted to establish a new world order in which human dignity would be respected, and all artificial distinctions working against respect for human personality, such as considerations of race, color, and creed, would be abolished. As described above, Iqbal believed in the universal brotherhood of mankind and abhorred all artificial distinctions based on nationalism and regionalism. He described this new world order by criticizing the existing orders, and it must be said that the old and the new, the progressive and the conservative, the communist and the capitalist, the Eastern and the Western cultures all come in for a good deal of criticism at his hands. While he criticized European lust for power, political as well as economic, and foretold the gathering doom of Europe's rapacious civilization, he also described the pathetic futility of lifeless spiritualism and worship of worn-out shibboleths that take the place of religion in the East. While he admired all that was worth admiring in any society or institution, he never hesitated to criticize all that deserved criticism. True to his Oriental traditions, Iqbal laid great emphasis upon the inner man, and yet he severely criticized the overemphasis on the inner man at the expense of other values in the following words. The cultures of Asia, and in fact of the whole ancient world, failed because they approached reality exclusively from within and moved from within outwards. This procedure gave them theory without power, and on mere theory no durable civilization can be based. Reconstruction, page 189. On the other hand, he described the defects of the Eastern culture in the following words. Thus, wholly overshadowed by the results of his intellectual activity, the modern man has ceased to live soulfully, that is, from within. In the domain of thought, he is living in open conflict with himself, and in the domain of economic and political life, he is living in open conflict with others. Reconstruction, page 177. This criticism by Iqbal of Western culture led many students to believe that he condemned it totally. A deeper study will show that while he criticized each culture for its defects, he also admired its virtues wholeheartedly. Describing the insecurity of Western culture, which according to Iqbal was carrying within itself the germs of destruction, he once wrote, "The master of the tavern says that the edifice of Western culture is based on insecure foundations and has walls of glass." Referring to the instability of Western culture, mainly due to the fact that the unparalleled mastery over nature achieved by modern science in the absence of moral and spiritual development constitutes a grave menace, Iqbal says. Europe fell a prey to its own sword. It set up the law of secularism. The aim of the new culture is to exploit man. This exploitation is euphemistically called trade. Unless this system is rooted out, true culture and religion will never be realized. But Iqbal is not content merely with criticism. He also shows the way out of the difficulties created by man. According to him, the only way out of this mess is giving religion its rightful place in the life of man. O you who separate soul from body, break the spell of this secular culture. Human reason must work within the limits imposed by the considerations of religion, and all scientific progress must be controlled by religious and moral ideals. As Iqbal says, the naturalism of the Quran is only a recognition of the fact that man is related to nature, and this relation in view of its possibility as a means of controlling her forces must be exploited in the interest not of unrighteous desire for domination, but in the noblest interest of a free upward movement of spiritual life. Reconstruction, page 172. On the other hand, it must be borne in mind that Iqbal's criticism of the West does not mean that he considers all is well with the East. As pointed out, he wants to rebuild human society, and with this object he subjects every existing culture to severe criticism. We have already referred to the unhealthy overemphasis of the East on the inner man. Another grave fault noted by Iqbal in the Eastern culture is the feeling of otherworldliness which has led Eastern people to neglect sciences. Addressing Eastern people, Iqbal says, "O thou who slumberest by dull opiates drugged, and namest mean this world material, rise up and open thy besotted eyes, call thou not mean thy world by love compelled." Iqbal attaches great importance to a scientific observer of nature and regards him as a kind of mystic seeker in the act of prayer. Thus, according to him, all scientific work is of the same spiritual significance as prayer, bringing man in close touch with the Absolute. While the West was busy acquiring sway over the forces of nature, by patient scientific work, the East was lagging behind, with the result that the Eastern nations could offer no resistance to the West's greed and lust for power. All this meant that while the West had power, the East had to be content with vision. As remarked by Iqbal, while vision without power may bring moral elevation, it cannot secure stability and permanence for the culture. What is needed is a combination of vision and power, which can help to uplift man in all fields: spiritual, moral, economic, and political. Iqbal also criticized some other features of Eastern culture. It is a well-known fact that religion in its higher manifestations is neither dogma nor priesthood, nor ritual. It is something more. Yet we find in the Eastern countries that formal, lifeless ritual and reverence for priesthood have replaced true religion. The net result is that in the East, religion has ceased to be an effective influence in the life of man. Iqbal further noticed that while in the West man was concerned mainly with the outside world, in the East people concentrated on the inner consciousness. He tried to effect a compromise by providing a bridge between these two extremes, while many thinkers in East and West have devoted their thought to the problem of making this world a better place to live in, and they have suggested numerous ways to consummate this, one of which has been to build a bridge between East and West. Several poets have also made great efforts to achieve this goal. Here we must refer to a great movement in Germany, known as Weltliteratur, the object of which was to present Eastern literature in the German language. Germany has always been more lucky in the possession of good translations from other languages, and this was partly due to the efforts of the Romanticists to realize universal poets. At the head of this movement was Schlegel. The Romanticists in Germany were not content merely with translating only European literary works. Their real object was to bring East and West together. Partly as a result of this great movement, and partly as a result of his own restless nature, which was always trying new subjects and new forms of poetry, the great German poet Goethe was always attracted by the East. As a Goethe scholar, Carl Victor says, "The tradition of the East, to be sure, had always been an effective element in Goethe's spiritual life. From his youth, he had an interest in the culture of the Middle East, as well as that of Greece and Rome. The Quran he had studied as a young man, and among the dramatic fragments of the early period was one intended to celebrate Muhammad as a religious genius." The interest in Eastern culture was further stimulated by the translation of Hafiz by the Viennese Orientalist Joseph von Hammer-Pagstall. Goethe read this in the summer of 1814. In the poetry of Hafiz, Goethe discovered 48-something which not only attracted him, but also had great affinity with trends in his own creative genius. The result of Goethe's introduction to Hafiz was that he received a great stimulus to a great creative effort, which resulted in the world having a fine collection of poetry in West-Ostlicher Divan. Heine writes of the Divan, "The charm of the book is inexplicable. It is a votive nosegay sent from the West to the East, composed of the precious and curious plants. Red roses, hortensias like the breast of a spotless maiden, purple digitalis like the large finger of a man, fantastically formed ranunculi, and in the midst of all, silent and tactfully concealed, a tuft of German violets. This nosegay signifies that the West is tired of thin and icy cold spirituality and seeks warmth in the strong and healthy bosom of the East." E. A. Bowring, The Poems of Goethe, George Bell and Sons, London, 1881, page 305. The Divan consists of the following books, most of the books having Oriental names: Birinci Mugannama, second Hafiznama, dritter Ushknama, dördüncü Tafkirnama, fünfte Runchnama, sixth Hikmatnama, siedem Tanvirnama. La acht Sulikanama, dokuzunju Sakinama, Patmadilnama, 11 Farsinama, 12 Chulknama. The Divan, on the whole, is a collection of fine and sublime poetry, and each book has its own charm. A work of such sublime beauty by a great artist, offering a bridge between East and West, challenged Iqbal and evoked a response in him. The Divan shows that according to the sage, for whom Iqbal had highest respect, the West needed spiritual sustenance from the East, and after studying Eastern literature and poetry, he provided this. This stimulated the creative genius of Iqbal, and he offered to the West in his Payam-i-Mashriq, Message of the East, all that East had to give. But he went a step further. He described in the Payam several Western thinkers and poets, Locke, Nietzsche, Bergson, Einstein, Browning, and Byron. Thus, in his message, he also touched upon what West had to give to the East. Iqbal provides a real bridge on which the future of mankind depends. On the cover of the Payam are written the words, in response to the Divan of the German poet. In the Divan, Goethe wrote, "God is of the East possessed. God is ruler of the West, north and south alike each bud rests within the gentle hand." On the cover of the Payam, Iqbal has most appropriately quoted the following verse of the Quran, "To God belong East and West." What a refutation of Kipling when he says, "East is East and West is West, the twain shall never meet." In his introduction to the Payam, Iqbal wrote, "I need hardly say anything about the Payam-i-Mashriq, which has been written 100 years after the Western Divan. The reader will himself see that its main object is to bring out those social, moral, and religious truths which have a bearing on the spiritual development of individuals and communities. Thus it will be seen that both Goethe and Iqbal have provided a bridge between East and West. Goethe wrote West-Ostlicher Divan, and Iqbal wrote Message of the East. According to Goethe, the West had to learn a good deal from the East to restore spiritual warmth and moral balance in its life. According to Iqbal, both East and West had a good deal to teach each other, which can serve as a corrective to tendencies in contemporary thought. In the past, West and East have produced great thinkers, scholars, and poets who have tried by their work and thought to bring East and West close. And amongst these, the contributions of Goethe and Iqbal are most significant, and humanity owes them both a deep debt of gratitude for this great service to mankind. As we have remarked above, the solution Iqbal offers to the grave crisis with which man is faced today is a synthesis of the two great elements, mind and body, reason and intuition, knowledge and love. It is by wedding intellect to love that man can avert the doom that is threatening him. This happy combination will give man emotional vitality and spiritual health, thereby ensuring his evolution on sound lines. Iqbal has remarked, "Humanity needs three things today: a spiritual interpretation of the universe, spiritual emancipation of the individual, and basic principle of a universal import, directing the evolution of human society on a spiritual basis." Iqbal takes East sunk in Platonic contemplation to the West with her unlimited capacity for action based on scientific observation and interpretation of phenomena. At the same time, he takes West absorbed in materialism to the spiritualism of the East. Leaders of thought in the world can make a great contribution to men's evolution by working earnestly to construct this bridge between East and West on the lines shown by Goethe and Iqbal and other benefactors of mankind. Iqbal was gratified to notice any progress towards bringing out a synthesis. For example, referring to the spiritual movement of Islam toward the West, he says, "The most remarkable phenomenon of modern history, however, is the enormous rapidity with which the world of Islam is spiritually moving towards the West. There is nothing wrong in this movement, for the European culture on its intellectual side is only a further development of some of the most important phases of the culture of Islam. Our only fear is that the dazzling exterior of European culture may arrest our movement, and we may fail to reach the true inwardness of that culture. Reconstruction, page 7.